gentlemen, are you ready?
Welcome to P-Nation newest group. Introduction. The name of the member.
In the thesis, dumping is one of the most useful trade practice and is the focus all countries. The availability of product flooding the country's market causes consumers to find it cheap. A cheap price can result in a lot of savings to be used in buying other product or investigative goals. Economic growth also occurs with the cost of cheap raw materials because it enables people to produce new products by benefiting from increased saving, investment, and economic development. We try in this research paper to explain the importance of international trade or economic growth and show that this practice is increasingly contributing to the improvement of inter-country economy and has a beneficial effect on developed and developing countries. Trade is becoming essential to ending global poverty. Countries involved with international trade will grow faster, increase productivity, innovate, expand employment opportunities, and increase income to the population of the country. In addition, open trade also provides affordable service and offer more goods to consumers who are low-income households. In 2017, increased by 4.3% of trading value in 6 years. The level of the trade increased with companies trading goods across a border and citizens can access goods and services at lower price. Dumping is a product that is exported at a price lower than the normal value, which is the price of the product sold in the local market cheaply. This dumping has its own advantage, such as benefiting a person to be used a raw material in processing new products, which this dumping will result in higher productivity as laborers are able to become experts in their respective field of work. This cycle is able to improve across the board, such as a cost efficiency and chapter new markets.
Dumping generally jeopardizes the financial viability of a product's manufacturer or producer in the importing country because it typically entails large export volumes. Price discrimination is another term for dumping. It happens when a producer lowers the price of an item entering a foreign market to a level below what domestic customers in the original country pay. The activity is thought to be done on purpose in order to get a competitive advantage in the importing market. So here the advantage of the dumping is the ability to pervade a market with product price that are frequently regarded as unjust, and consumers in the country of the importer can get a cheaper products. However, the disadvantage of dumping is due to subsidies offered to sell a lower price overseas. The exporter's country debt will rise. So next, here the 4 types of the dumping, which is first sporadic dumping. Second is predatory dumping. Third is persistent dumping, and last but not least is reverse dumping.
Our group organization is examining dumping economy impact. Our group wants to determine the topic causality. We primarily use secondary data. Besides that, we collect observational, not interventional data. We can find out whatever we need to know from authority website. We obtain secondary data from trusted network. Recently published secondary data has great trust and accuracy. Our group chose this method above others, like an questionnaire or interviewing expert in the field. We chose secondary data over other common methods because of timing restriction. Investopedia defines dumping as exporting a product at a cheaper price in a foreign market. than in the exporting country's local market. When dumped goods enter another country, the manufacturer financial stability is challenges. Dumping reduces the manufacturer financial ability, credit drop, and rise business risk. The WTO deems dumping justified unless a foreign country can establish it harm local manufacturer. Country employ tariff and quota to protect domestic products against dumping. Dumping has many purposes. First, dumping boosts export and the economy. Secondly, dumping can harm other country industry and can monopolize other country market, rise price and gain monopoly profit. Cheaper goods are more popular among consumers. The exporting country must sell surplus items, continue production, and earn foreign currency to foster economic growth.
The World Trade Organization (WTO) and the European Union both oppose dumping and take steps to avoid it. Dumping is technically not unlawful under WTO regulation unless the importing country can show that exporting corporations have caused harm to domestic producers. In the EU, the European Commission is in charge of deciding whether dumping has occurred between countries and if anti-dumping tariffs are the appropriate response. Tariff and import charges are used by countries to combat dumping, but they may also be viewed as protectionist policy designed to keep foreign competitors out completely. If any nation is a member of the WTO, it can file official complaint about both dumping and protectionist trade policy with the organization. Dumping, as we previously noted, is regarded as an unfair commercial activity that is prohibited by several nations and international trade regulation. In addition to oversight, WTO has jurisdiction over trade law in many nations and is also responsible for the completion of law for World Trade Agreement, as well as bilateral and multilateral rules are in place. Legislation and judicial matters are among the WTO responsibility, while the World Trade Organization is a reference in which trade agreements are ratified. The legislative and judicial tasks of this organization are carried out through a different settlement system.
Finding indication. Dumping is an unfair trade practice in which an exporter offers a product at a lower price than its usual value in the market of the importing country. Following their admission to the WTO, member states agree not to increase their custom duties in accordance with the relevant table, but to progress lower them when dumping causes a loss to an importer national domestic industry. The importing country might implement particular anti-dumping measures to help its domestic industry, even if its actions are in violation of WTO norms and terms under normal circumstances. The expanding number of countries in the WTO and adoption of a reduced tariff system, which includes emerging countries, will raise the danger of dumping in these countries. As a result, governments must alter their political policy in order to address this potential threat. Unlike several WTO accords, the anti-dumping agreement does not presume any difference among developing nations in terms of expense, percentage, and norms. Therefore, developing countries cannot expect rich countries to be more meek in their dealing with them. According to this agreement, if a reasonable period of time has passed after the stipulation of anti-dumping final duties, any beneficiary party may apply for a revision by submitting affirmative information that demonstrates necessary for the revision. The lack of a realistic time frame and the lack of particular time interval will pose various issues.
Conclusion of our research: when a country or firm export a product at a lower price in the foreign importer market than in the exporter local market, this is known as dumping. The capacity to flood a market with product price that are typically regarded unjust in the most significant advantage of dumping. dumping is permissible under WTO standard unless the foreign country can conclusively demonstrate the detrimental consequence the exporting firm has had on its domestic producer. Tariff and quotas are used by countries to protect domestic producers from dumping. Price discrimination is referred to as dumping. It happens when a producer lowers the price of an item entering a foreign market to a level below that domestic customer in the original country pay. The activity is thought to be done on purpose to get a competitive advantage in the importing market. While the World Trade Organization (WTO) has yet to rule on whether dumping constitutes an unfair trade practice, most countries are opposed to it. Under WTO regulation, dumping is permitted unless the foreign country can establish that the exporting firm can cause harm to its domestic producer. There is no specific ban on trade dumping between two countries if they do not have a trade agreement in effect.